the ECHO organization begun by one of our church members, Ron Wilkham, and Nancy Boyer and Parker Wilson, played a large role in providing legal support for Central Americans who were seeking political asylum in the Dallas immigration court. Since 2001, that organization, the ECHO, no longer exists, but a new organization founded in 2000, Human Rights Initiative of North Texas, has taken up the political asylum cause and expanded it to immigrants from countries all over the world. HRI represents not only asylum claims, but represents victims of human trafficking, victims of spousal or child abuse. It represents immigrant children traveling to the U.S. alone, or immigrant children who have been abused, abandoned, or neglected by their parents here in the United States. Bill's a graduate of the SMU Denman School of Law. In 1997, he received the Outstanding Political Asylum Lawyer Award from the Dallas Bar Association. He's a member of the State Bar Pro Bono College. He has mentored young lawyers for the Dallas Bar Association and authored commentaries and editorials on human rights for KERA and the Dallas Morning News. Bill volunteered many hours as a pro bono attorney for HRI clients before 2011 he became their executive director. Okay, issues surrounding immigration in the U.S. are current and they're a concern, I think, for all of us. Over 25 years ago, Hillary Clinton got wild applause in Beijing at the International Women's Conference when she said, and paraphrase, women's rights are human rights, and human rights are women's rights. Well, just about a month ago, Hillary Clinton paraphrased herself again, quoted herself again, and she said gay rights are human rights, and human rights are gay rights. So now I think it's time for Hillary to say along the less that immigrant rights are human rights, and human rights are immigrant rights. We're in the Lent season. Bill has titled his talk, The Fast I Choose, Working with Immigrant Survivors. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail, for that really gracious introduction. I came to this church about a year ago to hear one of my heroes, Rick Halpern, speak about his own work in human rights. And I walked in here and I saw Gail and Bill and so many people that I've known for decades. And I told Gail before, if she walked in, she said, "Don't you feel like you're home?" And I said, that's exactly how I felt, because I looked around and it's just so gratifying to see a room full of people that have been working for justice for decades. And, you know, Dallas gets a rap for being a really conservative place without compassion, and that actually hasn't been my experience. My experience has been there's a lot of people here that are very serious about the fight for justice. This first slide here has a couple of things on it that are worth noting. One is a quote from the book of Exodus: "You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." And so we see from that quote, from the very earliest parts of the Christian and Jewish scriptures, that migration is a part of the human story. And it continues to be a part of the human story. And those issues were present. That's why they were addressed in Scripture, is the idea of being compassionate for the stranger or the immigrant or the refugee or whatever term is used is a universal timeless truth. The other quote is from Dr. Martin Luther King, and it's really, it was a photo taken by my friend Dylan Hollingsworth, who's a local photographer, and he took that photograph at Occupy Dallas, and it says, "Our lives begin to end the moment we become silent about things that matter." I want to talk a little bit about our work at HRI, and I also want to talk a little bit about my own journey. I've practiced law for 30 years until January of last year, when I left my law practice to become the executive director of HRI. I was a trial lawyer. I tried all kinds of cases in state and federal court. I had arguments in courts of appeal. I had all sorts of business deals. And I am not one of those know about the Salvadoran Civil War, of course. I said, I don't know anything about the Salvadoran Civil War. And he said, well, yeah, there's tens of thousands of Salvadorans and Guatemalans who are making their way through the United States because their countries are being ripped apart by civil war. And then I really, in a very offhand manner, made a single comment which changed the whole course of my life. I said, well, if you ever need anything, give me a call. And so he did. He started calling me, and I started out by doing guardianships for unaccompanied minors. So these kids were up here with brothers or sisters or aunts or uncles, and their parents had been killed or missing in the Civil War, and I helped them get guardianships so they could get enrolled in school. Eventually, I took an asylum law training, and my very first client was a woman named Marta from Guatemala, and her husband had been a truckers union leader, had been very active, of course. They were taking their kids to school one morning, an unmarked car pulled up with an official government place on it. They pulled this man into a car, took off, and 2 days later they called Marta and told her that to come to the morgue in Guatemala City and identify her husband's body and been killed. Well, she was a very resolute young woman, and she started trying to investigate her husband's death and urged the police to do something about his murder. And then she started getting death threats because, of course, the men that had killed her husband were actually involved with the government. The government was not just complicit, but it actually been a part of his murder of his death squad. So I represented her in an application for asylum, and I was absolutely hooked by the experience. And so I did. This was 20-something years ago. I started a really simple procedure in a student's agency for to go out on that day that Gail mentioned. And so my practice was, I had a full-blown litigation, state court, federal court practice. And so I said, well, I'll take a case, and then when I finish one, I'll take another one. And I did that for 20 years, and I wound up with people, representing people in asylum cases from 20 different countries. This picture, the photos in this PowerPoint are things, mostly things that I've accumulated in my office over the years as a result of this work. This photo is a card that has a caricature of Parker Wilson on it. And at that time, I was right in the middle of the Chiapas rebellion, and so they did this cartoon of Parker Wilson looking like Subcommandante Marcos with his, can't read it, his coffee cup. There's his coffee from hell, because he was a real, he drank really strong coffee. So that was I started out with this very small thing, and it wound up just really becoming the thing I was most passionate about in my career, and really one of the things I was most passionate about in life. I love this quote from one of my favorite authors, Henry Nouwen, who was a Catholic priest. He wrote this: if you think about all of the prophets in the modern world, there are people who began by doing small things. I'm talking about small in the sense that they did not change everything overnight. They opened a soup kitchen, worked for migrant workers, or labored for the liberation of black people. Even when they knew their efforts were imperfect, these people created signs in the midst of this violent world of the coming kingdom. And I thought that was a really profound statement about, people set out. You don't set out to be most of us don't set out to be a human rights worker and really change the world. We start out with really simple, small things, and then we find that those things give our life purpose and meaning, and they're things that matter, and so we pursue them our whole life if we're intentional about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit of technical things, and I'm sure some of you here are quite familiar with asylum law, but maybe not everyone. So I'm going to give a little bit of just background on what asylum is. One thing I'll note, you'll see in red at the bottom, it says refugee applies to a person when they're outside of the United States. So you hear the word refugee used a lot, and those are really entirely different group of people than asylees. Refugees are people in war-torn countries that are resettled. They come in here in the United States with the permission of the American government, and this is the most critical distinction, really, is that they have, and it's not lavish by any means, but they do have resources available to them because of their status. Asylees, on the other hand, are people who come here to the United States because they fear returning to their country because of a well-founded fear of persecution because of one of 5 reasons: race, race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. And it's persecution by the government or by a group that the government can't or won't control. Gail mentioned gay rights, and we see these cases from, for instance, Uganda and Central American gays that are persecuted by the government or by groups the government won't control, and they fall into this category of a particular social group. The other group of people, you'll notice, I'll just ask you notice any group of people that are subject to persecution that are not listed in those five grounds for asylum?
I would say sex. How about gender?
Gender is not there. It is not a ground for asylum. And one of the ways that you're able to occasionally get asylum for someone because of a woman, because of her gender, are things like arranged marriages or female genital mutilation. Those are the grounds that you somehow can get a social class definition and make a case out of that. Persecution is pretty much what you might think it to be: beatings, rape, mental harm to family, threat to life and freedom, FGM. I think just about without exception, every client I had for 20 years has been a torture survivor. So that's just, of course, quite common. This little chart illustrates what the process of applying for asylum is. If someone enters the United States and they're not caught and put into deportation proceedings, then you can do what's called an affirmative asylum application, which is filling out a really, really, really detailed application and filing it with the asylum office and going to an interview with an asylum officer where they question you. You file whatever documents you manage to take with you and tell your story to the asylum officer. And the asylum officer, which in Texas is at Houston, can actually grant asylum at that point. If they don't, then you go into deportation proceedings, you go to immigration court, and it surprises people to learn that's an adversarial situation. The government's represented by a very aggressive lawyer. The government is opposing the person staying here in the United States. It's an evidentiary trial in front of an immigration judge. If people are not represented by lawyers, their chances of getting asylum through that system are virtually don't exist. So it's critical that someone have a competent attorney in order to have any chance of getting asylum here. And that's actually a very kind of sad awakening for our clients. Usually they're a bit naive about our legal system. They think that America is a welcoming place. That's why they came here. They believe our ideals of freedom and human rights, and so they're kind of abruptly surprised by the fact that the government's not quite as open to that as they had hoped. I want to just talk about this, actually, the thing that I love about this work, so I just want to tell you some stories of people that I've represented over the years, and that's really what's captured my heart. These are just Ethiopian money and a little Ethiopian flag. I've had several clients from Ethiopia. My favorite was this man. He was 62 years old. He was a school teacher. He had been a political activist his entire life, starting at the time of Haile Selassie, when he was an opponent of the feudalistic land practices of the emperor. He was a school teacher and eventually became active in the teachers' union. He was, and that was all he did, was particularly politically active. He was just speaking up for the rights of students and the right for teachers, for pay, adequate educational opportunities. And one day, during the Marxist era, the Marxist Derg, which was one of the deadliest regimes in the continent of Africa, when they were in power, soldiers came to the school. They arrested him, another teacher, and several teenage students, and took them straight to prison. He spent 5 years in a psycho prison. And I asked him, was there a trial? No. Were there charges? Well, they told us we were counter-revolutionaries. And he said that they were mistreated, of course. They had to drink untreated river water, water, food or sanitation. And he was there for 5 years. Eventually, said the government came in and said, "You agree that you won't oppose the he really stayed pretty inactive until the Marxists were overthrown by the current military dictatorship of Ethiopia. And that's when he became very active in opposition to political parties as a pro-democracy activist. I won't go into all of the details of what happened to this man, but suffice it to say, he was arrested at least 3 times, jailed and tortured at least 3 times. Every time he was jailed and tortured, he was warned to stop his political activity. Finally, he lost his job as a teacher. He started a business as a bus driver. The government confiscated his bus. And at that point, he lacked any ability to support himself. He had been threatened and all that. So he finally, reluctantly left Ethiopia, left his wife and children behind, came here to the United States. I represented him in immigration court, and I asked him, it's really one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in a courtroom. I asked him, sir, you were jailed repeatedly for your pro-democracy activism. You were tortured, you were beaten. Every single time they let you out of jail, they warned you to stop. And you kept going. Why did you do that? And this man, with real dignity, started weeping. And he said, because there is a price for freedom. And I did this for my children. That still gives me goosebumps. Because it was quite sincere on his part. And I thought, what a privilege to be in court representing somebody like that. And he was granted asylum. This was back when I was in private practice. I was his pro bono lawyer. This year I got to meet his wife and children when they came into the office for us to help them all get their green cards. So he's safe here in America now. This is a papyrus from an Egyptian Coptic Christian I represented. He was a dentist. And this was actually several years ago, thanks for Coptic Christians have actually deteriorated in Egypt since the time I represented this man. But these extremists had broken into his dental clinic, wrecked it, beat him up, and he went to the police and complained. They started saying, and this is quite common, then they started interrogating him about what he was involved in and what he was doing. And so the police, of course, were of no benefit to him. And I represented he and his wife and children get asylum here in the United States. I love it. I drive right past the Coptic church on Plano Road, where his family worships without any difficulty today. This client, this is a wall hanging, wall carving I got from my client from Togo. He was put in prison and tortured simply for being a poll watcher. The thing I remember about this guy was that he spoke only French when I started representing him in this asylum case, and it took about a year for his case to go to trial. And by the time we went to trial, his English was good. He testified in French, but his English was good enough to correct the translator when the translator was he would laugh, he got asylum here and is now living in Greece at work. Eritrea, Foreign Policy magazine, calls Africa's North Korea, and it's Foreign Policy magazine calls it an open-air prison. This is one of the most repressive places in the world. It's a little tip of Ethiopia, you know where Eritrea is. My client from Eritrea was a Pentecostal Christian. The country outlawed every religion other than Islam, and I think Catholicism and Lutherans for some reason, which I don't really understand. Those 3 religions were legal. Everything else was prohibited. This woman went to a church of 1,000 people. They came with a chain on the front door and said, "You're done." And so they started. She was all Eritreans. They had compulsory military service. She was in the military. The guards, the officers saw her and a few people in their dorm at night reading the Bible, and for that they were all arrested, all taken out, and put in an overseas shipping container out in the desert for about 10 days, and with no food. She was actually fortunate to survive. And so I represented her in her asylum case. The thing I remember about her case was when we were preparing her case for trial, her brother was here in the United States. He had obtained asylum. And her niece, the man's daughter, her teenage daughter, was in prison at that time. And he said, "I have no idea if I'll ever see my daughter again." And I said, man, you have such a good attitude about life. I was kind of surprised by that. He said, you Americans, you have everything. You complain all the time. I was really struck by that. This is an arrest warrant from Zaire, which is now in Congo. This client really changed my whole point of view about this work. I represented him. He was he was in the Zaire military during the reign of Sese Mobutu, and he was leaking information to the opposition parties. So they caught him and arrested him, put him in jail. They were actually driving him out in the jungle to shoot him, he thought, and the guy turned around, and it was this proverbial driving down the jungle road. They stop and he thinks, this is it. The guy says, I know you're dead. Get out of here. And he let him go, and he escaped the United States. When he was married, he left, and again, this is not uncommon, left his wife and children behind to come to the United States. I represented him. He obtained asylum. And then, months later, he just showed up unannounced in my law office with his wife and children. And then he said, I wanted you to meet my family. I went, oh, this is great. And, I was kind of busy. And he said, no, I wanted to thank you in person. And then he clicked with me. His wife and children had been in hiding. And so now they were all here in the United States, safe. And he said, I just wanted to thank you in front of my family. And I said, well, no, it's okay. And I was kind of dismissive about it, honestly. And he looked at me and said, no, I know what you did for me. You gave me my life. And it totally changed how I look at this. Because before that, to be honest with you, I felt like I was kind of a good guy doing good work. And then I realized, this is a privilege. Most people go a whole life and never have a single moment like that. Some people never have the opportunity to hear something like that. And I thought, man, I'm getting at least as much out of this as I'm getting. And I never felt really, all that great about like I was doing good deeds after that. I just felt thankful for the opportunity. So you think about how do these people get here? They're not refugees. This guy, this is the letter you get from the asylum office saying, this is the golden ticket saying you've been given asylum, you can live here with freedom in the United States. This man was from an African country. He had been Rwanda, he was from Rwanda, and he was arrested because of his opposition to the current government. He was put in jail, he was put in solitary confinement, he was tortured. He was there for quite a lot of time. He said every day this guard would walk past him, and he would go to the window and he'd say, look, I've got money. I can pay you to go with me out of here. I have a life. I have a job. And he said the guy would not even talk to him, just go by every day. He said, but finally he said, look, if I help you, I'm going to give you that stuff. And he said, okay. And so one day they took him, they just came, opened the doors, took him and 5 other guys out in the jungle. They had a pit dug. They all knelt behind that pit and they shot them all. Or so he thought. He said, actually, it was uncertain about what happened, what he thinks happened. He said the guard that he somehow made some sort of emotional connection with this one guard. And that guy hit him in the head and knocked him into this ditch. And he survived. All 5 of these other people were dead. And he climbed out of this ditch and made his way to a clinic. He called his wife. His wife came in bed, gave him a passport, some money, not much, a little money, and he said, I had no plan, I had no idea what I was going to do. He was all bandaged up and stuff, and he made his way to Tanzania. He was in a hotel in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and this man came up to him, he said, what happened to you? And he said, I looked at him, he said, I don't know what else to do, so I just told him my story. And the guy looked at him, and he said, I'm going to be an old man someday, and I'm going to regret it if I don't help you. It turned out he was a ship captain, and he said, I never do this, but I'm going to help you. And he stowed him away on a cargo ship, and he said, I'm going to take you somewhere safe. So he took him to the port. He said, you can't come up. I mean, I'll get in big trouble if anybody finds out. So he was in this hold of a cargo ship. They made their way to the port of Houston. And he said, can you swim? And he said, yeah, I can swim. So he opened up a port on the side of the ship, lowered a rope in, and he lowered himself off the side of this boat, swam to shore. He went to a convenience store. He knew one person in America. And he called guy and he said, "Hey, can you come get me?" He said, "Well, I live in Chicago." And he said, "But I have a buddy in Fort Worth who can get you." So he did. And he drove down to the road to Fort Worth to pick him up. Brought him to Dallas. He made his way to Human Rights Initiative. They signed his case for Indian and helped him get asylum. And I just thought, what an amazing thing to do that. And while the case was pending, I have to say, this is really difficult work. And I've got two strikes against me. I'm a guy and I'm a lawyer, and so I'm not particularly adept at dealing with emotions. And I remember this guy got a fax from his cousin that his wife had been arrested and put in prison on this case was pending. He just sat in my office sobbing. And it is the most helpless I've ever felt in my life because I had nothing. And I just had no words to say other than "I'm sorry." They said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Look, this is like being on a plane. They tell the moms to put the oxygen on you first and then take care of your baby." I said, "You have to take care of you, and then they give you a position to help your wife and child. If you don't survive, then they have to go." But that's the best I had to offer. I want to talk about a little bit about what things that you can do or be aware of. Gail mentioned this. This is very, very timely. HRI, we're a small organization with a small budget, so we've never been involved in national advocacy, but we've got local law firms that are pro bono assisting us with advocacy. We're trying to meet with our senators to talk to them about this. Is not. Ask yourself, how often have you heard anything about asylum seekers or refugees in any of the conversation about a comprehensive immigration reform? It's almost totally absent, and there are real issues in asylum law that should be addressed. These are some. One of them is this one-year filing deadline. What happened? If you do not apply for asylum within 1 year, no matter what happened to you, then you do not get asylum. And you get what's called withholding of deportation. We have clients right now that missed the 1 year filing deadline for one reason or the other, and they were left with withholding of deportation. For one of these clients, it's a married woman that needs to try to she may never see her husband again. And she's safe here in America, but she does not have the ability ever to get a green card or to resettle her family to the United States. Also, this is shocking to people, that you do not have the right to work while your case is pending. Because of the backlogs in the immigration court, the delays for up to 2 years. They're now setting asylum trials in 2015. Well, all that time, they're not entitled to any government benefits whatsoever, and they are not prohibited from working, and they do not work illegally, because they're all going to be asked on the stand whether or not they're working illegally, and the judges will hold it against them. And so they're just put in a terrible situation. And then also, the law really should have some clarification on these gender-based claims, because you really, as opposed to this sort of amorphous particular social group, we really believe that gender should be the basis for asylum. If a woman's being persecuted by groups that the government wants to control, she should be able to seek refuge here. We'll talk about our other program. This is the work that I didn't actually do this work before I went to work for HRI, but I have to say I found it just as compelling as the asylum work. First of all, is the Violence Against Women's Act. Thankfully, this is a great indication of what political pressure can do. Vala died in the last Congress and was just approved, reauthorized. And that was a response to political pressure on Republicans and Democrats to reauthorize this law. The very first, I don't know, Vala's impact with immigrants is that if you are an immigrant, it actually applies to both genders. And we've actually had male Vala clients, although the vast majority, of course, are women that are immigrant women that are married to American citizen spouses, and they use their immigration status as a pressure point to keep them in an abusive relationship. And so Vala creates the ability for them to apply for a green card without the cooperation of their abuser husband. My very first intake, when I was set in on an intake after I went to work for HRI, was a Her husband and her were married, and then he became increasingly controlling. She got pregnant, and so they said we were going to go back to where they were from. And so they did, and he actually beat her up in front of her family. And because he didn't want her to have a baby, he was pressuring her to have an abortion, and she didn't want to do that. This woman, she took pictures of the wounds, and he actually took her travel documents from her. She called the American Embassy, and the American Embassy intervened with this guy and said, these are her travel documents, you have to return them to her. She left him, she took her computer, she flew to the United States, she left him, she went straight to a shelter here in the United States where she had a baby, and she showed up in her office with a 10-day-old baby, saying, can you help me get status to stay here in the United States? And I looked at this 19-year-old girl, and I thought, you are one brave woman. And it was another confirmation of why I felt like, okay, I did the right thing, even off rights. So we did these U visas, which are, Congress recognized that immigrants are a vulnerable population for crime because they're nervous about calling the police and reporting things for fear of being deported, which is why it's so dangerous when the states start passing these laws or making the police enforce their immigration laws. It's a really short-sighted policy. So most of our clients that are entitled to U visas are victims of sexual assault and children that are victims of incest and sexual assault, and they cooperate with the police. And if they cooperate, and this is why this is such a great program. In order to get a U visa, the police department has to certify that this person was a victim of a crime, number one, and number two, a violent crime, and number two, that they cooperated with the police or would cooperate with the police in the prosecution. If you don't get that certification from the police, you do not get a U visa. So it's virtually no chance of fraud in a program like that. And again, really brave kids, teenagers, cooperate with the police to prosecute these guys. I don't know how many of you read the book Enrique's Journey. It's a great book, really worthwhile. That picture is a Pulitzer Prize winner of these kids that are riding the trains across Mexico to get here in the United States. We see lots of these kids, and increasingly so. These kids that get up here, escaping the gang violence of Guatemala and Honduras, get lots of clients from El Salvador and Honduras. Ironically, these gangs were exported from our prisons here in the United States, and they took the criminal enterprise with them, and now it's quite dangerous to be a teenager. Just last week, we represented a young, he's now 16. He was 15 when he was in Honduras, and the Marchers were trying to recruit this. He was a nice kid, church-going kid, and he didn't want to join the gangs, and they kept pressuring him because his uncle was in the gangs. He refused, said, I don't want to do that, and finally, one of these gang members took him to a park and slit his throat and stabbed him in the abdomen. He was in a coma there in a hospital in Honduras, managed to get out. His parents sent him to the United States, but I don't remember who took him here. But suddenly he got here 15 years old with a walker. Because of the law and the Fifth Circuit, which is where we are, he does not have much of an asylum case. In California, in the Ninth Circuit, he probably had an asylum case, but not here. And so what we did is we filed an application for prosecutorial discretion on humanitarian grounds, and the government agreed. And I don't want to paint too black of a picture of the government. They're pretty aggressive adversaries, but we do have lawyers that are working for the Department of Homeland Security that will do the right thing. And in this case, they did the right thing. Help this kid stay here in the United States. About 22% of our cases were for domestic violence cases. 46% were the U visas, children's victims of violent crime. 32% were the special immigrant juvenile visas. I mentioned that the asylum clients are not entitled to uses all sort of creative ways of finding housing, clothing, medical care for our clients. Just as the biggest need we've had has been housing, because they don't qualify for anything. And so they basically couch surf. We've had clients sleep in cars. We've had clients go to homeless shelters. This year we were able to get a small grant from the Bear and Blue Foundation, which was enough to pay apartment rent for 1 year for an asylum seeker. And here's our client. There's a guy, a pending case, which is why you can't see his face here. He's moving into an apartment right now. So that's really great. These are the statistics for the types of social services we see for our clients. Medical referrals. We have a relationship with the Agape Clinic here with Grace United Methodist. They see they're the only people that will see all of our clients with really no restriction at all. And that's just been a godsend for us this last year. We refer our clients for clothing to the St. Vincent de Paul. We do donations there, so they let our clients shop for clothing there. We do coat drives in the winters, so we're able to get, our clients are coming, a lot of these guys are coming, men and women are coming from Africa. They're not accustomed to they think we have it every year. So it's good that they don't migrate to these are some of the things that I hope one of the things you've asked yourself is, okay, so what can we do? These are things that we need. We need volunteer doctors. We need volunteer lawyers. We need volunteer translators. We have clients from all over the world. We have a constant need for toiletries, shampoos, soap, diapers, adult diapers for clients that are disabled, or we've had clients with hearing losses because of torture, all sorts of medical issues. Things like if they need a forensic. One of the biggest needs are finding physicians that will do forensic examinations for our clients. We have a very, very short list of doctors that will afford to do a forensic exam, which is something as well. Pardon?
Do we have to get a pathologist to do that kind of work?
No. Yes. Yeah. Advocacy. I'd be happy to correspond with you. Give us some points. You can Google my name and my legal director's name, Chris Mansour. We wrote an editorial for the Austin. I couldn't get the morning news to run it, so the Austin American Statesman ran an editorial about asylum law. We had some bullet points in that one. We, of course, it's really interesting. I'll talk about donations just for a second. I was not one of those guys that was a rich lawyer. I made a very comfortable, good living. But I learned one of the things that clicked in my head while I was doing this work is, I love doing this work. These guys don't stay open unless they have money. And so I became a donor at HRI, and I was a donor for the whole 12 years that I was a pro bono lawyer. And I never gave big sums. Mostly it was $50 a month or $100 here or there. And now I have access to our data, and I go in and look, so how much did I give over the course of 10 years? And it actually was, several $1,000. So these small, I've got friends that will write $50 checks, and I saw, I wish it were more. And I'm like, hey, it's nothing to be apologized for. Those small donor gifts are the lifeblood of an agency. So I hope you consider doing that for us. And then we have a 5K coming up on April 13th. I want to just talk a bit about statistics. The fiscal year 2012, we have a budget of about $600,000, 10 employees, and we have $2.5 million for free legal services. We are the only agency in Dallas that represents asylum seekers pro bono. And we have great relationships with the major law firms in this city. We have when these people go into court, they're walking into court with some of the best lawyers in the city, and it's very gratifying. Our statistics, I have to say, I'm a bit nervous about quoting statistics. So far, our statistics have been really good. They're much, much higher than the approval rates nationally. And particularly here, you can see the Dallas Immigration Court's grant rate is 29%. Our grant rate for asylum cases is about 90%. Now, I've been talking to my staff, I don't like measuring ourselves by statistics entirely because I want us to take hard cases. I want to say, you know, in cases sound and not frivolous, but I don't want us to just take cases that we think, we know we can win that. And I did, in fact, I said this at our intakes, and I say, that's not even the question we should ask. We should ask, do we believe the person? Do we think they're entitled to asylum? Not do we think is the judge going to grant asylum? Because we have no control over that. And so far, our statistics have been very, very good. But again, what I want to do is, title of my talk, this is kind of a mission statement for me from the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah. Prophet Isaiah, you may know, was confronting a society. This is a timeless situation, a country that might have a lot of people that do a lot of outward observance of religion, but ignore the things that are essential. And so the prophet said this, is this a fast? Is it a fast like this which I choose, a day for a man to humble himself? Is it for bowing one head like a reed, for spreading sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, even an acceptable day to the Lord? Is not this the fast I choose, to loosen the bonds of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke? Is it not to divide your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless poor to your house when you see the naked and cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh? And it's just so fascinating to me that Scripture recognizes the fact that service to the poor is in fact an act of worship. I'm going to stop with this. This is one of my most valued possessions. This is a letter from a client of mine from Zimbabwe. She had been a political activist and lost everything, started over, I helped her get asylum here. And then she paraphrased the words of Jesus in writing this to me. And she says, Mr. Holston, I can never thank you enough for all you've done for me. I am only consoled by the knowledge that one day the Lord my God will call you by name and say to you, Bill, I was homeless, I was insecure, I was lonely and afraid, and I lost all hope in life. I just did not know where to turn, and you came to my rescue. You will look at him and wonder and say, Lord, when did I see you in that condition? And he will answer you, do you remember Anna? That was indeed me you took care of. Now enter into the home of my Father. Mr. Holston, I pray for you often and wish you and your family the very best. Yours sincerely, Anna. I got nothing else to add.
Where do you go in the beginning of your talk, I think it's like the fourth slide over, you're talking about the process you go for asylum. What website or what organization, who do you call to get that started?
To get what, I'm sorry?
The asylum process started. Where do you go? What's the phone number?
I'm not sure exactly. There's not you could go to the, if you wanted to just look at the documents, like what are the pieces of paper that you have to file. Well, first of all, if you knew somebody was an asylum seeker here in the United States, or here in this area, you could refer them to HRI. I should talk about that. Our process is a phone intake, so if you call our main number, then somebody will walk through whether or not that case is. If you just want to look at the process itself, go to the Department of Homeland Security website, and just all of this is here. The process of applying for asylum, the forms, all of that.
Okay. Do you have your business card with you?
I do. I'd be happy to give you one. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Now, thinking about people that are left behind in these war-torn areas that, because of the law, don't get to bring the entire family stuff behind them to be persecuted. We've written around trying to find out the best way to deal with that. And one example they gave us is humanitarian parole. But there's an assurance apparently that if you apply for it and receive it, then you can't apply for asylum once you're here temporarily. I don't know if that's true or not. But
I don't know that. It's possible. There are all kind of bars to asylum. Maybe I don't actually know the answer, but it's possible. I should clarify that if you get asylum, then you can bring your family over here. If you miss the 1-year deadline and you get withholding You're never in line for a green card and you cannot find your family.
Okay.
Our asylum claims are all, it takes them a while, about a year or so to get established, raise the money. We just had a guy who's a human rights lawyer from Congo, brought his wife. His wife was pregnant when he left, and so she came to the airport with a 1-year-old child that he had never met. And that happened this year, which was a really beautiful thing to see. Yeah.
Organizations like Catholic Charities and the Immigrant, do they help with asylum?
They do not. At one point, Catholic Charities did asylum cases, have done asylum cases with them, but they currently don't have the resources to do this. Yeah, we're the only agency in this whole region that does asylum cases for both. Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts, Bill, about kind of what's going on with like the SMU Law School? Read some things that are sort of encouraging sounding. Some of those students, are they qualified to take on pro bono, and just kind of what's your take on?
Well, two things. One is the law school, unlike when I was there, the law school now requires pro bono volunteer hours from their students. We get law student interns that can help us with like country condition research, briefing, things like that. At one time, the law school had a grant, and they had an asylum law clinic. And you could, as long as they're supervised by a lawyer, the law school can start a clinic and do asylum cases. The clinic gets to what's called a student bar card. They go down to the courthouse, try cases, do criminal cases, civil cases. They could do asylum cases. Currently, they don't do that because they don't have funding. But they put it, there are law schools all over the United States that have asylum law clinics, and they're great. I mean, they do good work. If they have a good person. Actually, Bruce Button, who was at one point a lawyer at HRI, he now is at Berkeley, and he's running their asylum project there at Berkeley.
If I recall, a long time ago, when I was involved in this work, the immigration judges didn't have to be lawyers.
Yeah, they're all lawyers. I don't know if they're required. I didn't say this, but it's true. We are in one of the most harsh places in the United States. We have judges here that are, we talk to lawyers from other parts of the United States, and they say, you have to do that? I mean, this is a very, it's one of the reasons I'm nervous about statistics, because this is a particularly hot, tough spot. And we're, go ahead.
Doesn't this area, particularly Houston, get a lot of?
Absolutely. You know, well, the Ethiopians and Eritreans I talked about, they swam the Rio Grande. Yeah. And Eritreans, the way they get here is this tells you a lot right here. They escape Eritrea to go to Sudan. Okay, and then from Sudan, they go to South Africa, and then they hire a smuggler. This can cost their family $8,000 or $9,000 to make their way to Brazil, all the way up South America, Central America, Mexico, and across the border. So that's, this is, and then DFW, the airport. A lot of people are coming to the airport here. Back when we had Somali asylum seekers coming here, I represented a bunch of those people through the project. And they were coming into the DFW airport with fake documents and turning themselves in at the port of entry seeking asylum.
All I can say is if they're escaping into Sudan, because we've been in our Florida, the other people from the Middle Maps, if they're escaping into Sudan, they are desperate.
Yes.
But these sort of things are relevant. I remember talking to their training, and I made that very point. So no, it's much better for Christians in Sudan, or at least in Khartoum, than it was. And it's probably easier. There's some extent in Khartoum, but in the south, down into the mountains for Darfur. Yes.
Okay.
If we get the approval or the funding, I guess, for a law school, public university, the first time we've done it, University of North Texas Law School, is it likely they're going to open they would likely open an immigration clinic for those second-year law students? I know they're going to be
likely that institutions continue to operate the way they currently do, which is a very ultra-academic approach to law. But if they, what I think is, if they want to have a more practical orientation, then this is the kind of thing. I mean, the students love this stuff. And I have to say this, you know, a lot of baby boomers that you're in this room, the younger generation of lawyers are much, much more socially conscious.
Good.
These young people coming out of law school and college now, they are commanding law firms, and they want to get back. When I got out of law school, I wasn't thinking about that, and none of my cohorts were either.
How do you explain that?
Well, you know, I think there's a couple things. Some of it's just the difference in generations. I mean, I think this generation is just more, they're more oriented towards finding meaning in life than us baby boomers were. And then there have been some things like this guy Gary Hogan in the International Justice Mission with the human trafficking and slavery. I've had quite a few young people call me and say, okay, somebody gave me your name because you're a human rights lawyer. Could you talk to me? Because I read Gary Hogan's book and I'm interested in human rights work. And I said, well, if you're interested in human rights work, you ought to call me Try, because that's what we're doing. So I think that book in itself was pretty transformative to a lot of college students and law students.
You know, we have some human trafficking courses. I know we had it in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Does it touch your office?
It does. We have done trafficking cases in the past, and we can do. We have the expertise to do it, but Mosaic Family Services, which has a shelter, and so if the women are, you know, like coming out of prostitution or something, they're well known to law enforcement. And they do lots of trafficking cases. So we really, you know, it's on our website because we've done it, but it's not really a big part of our, because I think they're actually adequately, they have a different model than us, though, because they handle cases with staff attorneys, so I think they have a harder time with the resources to take all the cases. That's one of the beauties about having a pro bono model is we can have 3 lawyers on staff and do tons of cases. And that's a hard thing to do. I mean, that's taken us 13 years to establish.
Are there still the big detention centers in the valleys that there were?
Well, you know, that's a great point. I think I actually had it as one of the action points of advocacy. This is a huge problem. Number one is there's still detention centers on the border, but there's one of the biggest detention centers is out in Houston, which is 4 hours away from here. Well, nobody is going there. I mean, we can. I said we can, but we don't have the resources to send lawyers 4 hours away and interview people for asylum cases. So they're sticking these people. I don't even know if at one point asylum seekers were getting detained. And I don't know currently if that's so or not. And I don't know if anybody does know, because nobody's going to the prison there because it's, you know, 4 hours. And I don't know if that's intentional, if they're sticking these detention centers in places where they don't have ready access to lawyers or not. But whether it's intentional or not, the result is they don't. Now, the valley's a little better because there's a pro bar. Pro bar's down there, and in fact, I talked to the legal director down there, and she said some of the Eritreans were choosing to stay in detention because their case was getting heard quicker than if they got released and went out and got a private attorney. I'm sorry? Eloy? No. It's a detention center.
Haven't been on nowhere.
Yeah,